And welcome back, fellow American patriots and Minutemen standing at the ready to fight anew for the issues that matter with a sense of urgency on this Thursday here at Blaze TV. Your host, Daniel Horowitz at Sierra Podcast. We are back here today to tick down our list of issues for 2026 that matter to civilization. Today, we're going to focus on two big ones: AI slop, de-skilling of an entire generation of Generation AI slop, what we can do about it, how it's a problem, and also the housing crisis. I mean, we got to function cognitively and we have to have a home. These are two pretty big issues. We'll start off with housing, then we'll go to a special guest that we've had on last year, Tim Estes. But first off, the reason why I started a Substack is because of this algorithmic slop where technology is no longer a tool to enhance the human experience, but it supplants it. So it's not like, hey, I want to learn, I want to get smarter, I want to follow who I want to follow. No, you can't follow who you want to follow. It shoves on you who Google and Meta, who they want you to follow, and that's why Substack's really the only way to do that now. So, in addition to subscribing to the video component of this show, which I'm so glad a lot of you are subscribing to the YouTube page at Horowitz Show, also the Substack at Daniel Horowitz. I have so much to get to. I don't have enough time. So, what I'm going to do is leave a Daniel's Digest roughly twice a week. I sent out an email earlier this morning with stories that maybe I didn't get a chance to get to. So make sure to subscribe to at Daniel Horowitz Substack. You just, put it in a search engine. You'll find it easily. Eventually I'll get my own domain. But for now, either check it out on Substack, or if you want the emails directly, subscribe there. So the big story today: Trump made a number of announcements yesterday that he's going to increase defense spending by 50%. He's going to take away dividends from defense contractors if they don't listen to him. And he's going to ban institutional investors, corporations from buying residential homes. So a lot of this kind of strongman stuff, a lot of it, you really have to see what plays out. Whether he'll do it for better or for worse. And also, typically, if it's something he doesn't have the authority to do, not typically, the courts will step in, because even when he does have the authority, the courts block it and he still listens. So I'm going to discuss the housing thing in greater detail with one of our housing experts next week, when we actually see the dust settling, we see what he does. But for now, I wanted to give you guys some baseline thoughts here, because what Trump is doing with the housing order, to the extent he follows through with it, is actually emblematic of what he does on everything. And mind you, I broadly agree with the goal of not having, Blackstone buy up the residential homes. But the problem with rote populism, aristopopulism, as I call it, rather than free market populism, is that it's often not rooted in reality and fact. Trump likes to address the symptom while actually exacerbating the cause of that symptom. Trump will often want things that are mutually exclusive. So he wants to treat the symptom of high healthcare costs, treat the symptom of high housing costs, but not the problem. And in the realm of the problem and the cause of the problem, he'll often make it worse. So, like, I don't want high healthcare premiums, but I want to mandate that they cover everything. I don't like high housing prices, but I want to continue Federal Reserve and HUD juicing up of the market to fund seniors, piggy bank in the form of a house. But it's not a piggy bank, and it shouldn't be used that. What happens is, on social media, you have these shiny populist objects, and even when they're correct and righteous, they're demagogued and they use sophistry even when they're right. So we talk about this a lot, how you could identify a problem, but you make that everything when it's only a small symptom. So here's the deal with housing. The institutional investor ownership of residential homes in most parts of the country is a symptom, not the cause of high home pricing. It's a very small slice of the pie in most places. And where it is more prominent, the lion's share is really mom and pop real estate owner people, individuals who dabble in and owning 1 to 5 homes, not those owning more than 100. So I don't mind, and I actually applaud and support banning corporations like Blackstone. It's not BlackRock. A lot of people are getting that wrong too. BlackRock is a different problem. Let's get our facts straight. It's Blackstone and others. But, the reality is I am fine with banning it. But what I'm not fine with is treating a 1% symptom of the problem when, uh, in terms of the cause of the problem, Trump is supporting the very policies that exacerbate it. So first, let's understand what the cause is and why, to the extent corporate ownership of residential homes is somewhat of a problem in some areas, that's a symptom, not the cause. You hear all over the internet, and I think this is what gets to Trump, 2 causes of the housing crisis. One is wrong, and one is just a tiny symptom. The tiny symptom, as we mentioned, is the corporate buying of homes. The cause, the other cause that's actually wrong, is that it's a supply problem. And we've said this many times, that the reality is in 19 states, there's actually more inventory, mainly in the South, than there was in 2019 pre-COVID bubble. There's a record number of sellers over buyers, according to Redfin. It's not an inventory problem. We have 9.5 months of new construction, which is above average. It's a healthy number. The problem is, even though we have the inventory, it's too doggone expensive. Why is it too expensive? That's what we're not addressing, and that's what Trump supports exacerbating. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. This started with the response to the dot-com bubble crash and the recession of 9/11, and then post-Great Financial Crisis, and then in COVID, where government said, look, we want everyone to afford houses. So we have 0 or near 0 interest rates, which was not natural. And everyone's like, oh, I could take a 30-year mortgage for nothing, and incentivize people who can't afford it, or just in general, overindulge the market and created a bubble. And that created upward pressure on housing prices. That's number one. Number two, government went ahead and bought several trillion in mortgage-backed securities. So we talk about corporate ownership, as government ownership is the big problem. Number three is you have all of these FHA, Freddie, Fannie, Ginnie programs to incentivize 3% down, and you can't afford it, and blocking foreclosures. It's all that together that has created a housing bubble. And then there's the fourth factor, which is really the capstone of where we are now and the linchpin to it, which is they got everyone into the houses with the near 0 interest rates and all this stuff. But then the COVID spending created generational inflation and then trapped people into low rates. So then now when rates had to go up, they had to raise them, and then naturally the Treasury, 10-year Treasury went up because of the inflation. So now people have a problem. They don't want to, they're trapped. We've never had the government juice up pricing this much, but also based on low mortgage rates that then had to rise, not that high, but back to average, that now no one wants to change their mortgage rate. That has frozen the market. Okay, I'm not telling you anything novel. That is the problem. And then in conjunction with the general inflation that's affecting food and clothing and utilities and everything else, and insurance, and that's the record debt and spending, and that's creating, makes it much more expensive to repair a home, to make additions to a home, to build a home. Some aspects of the tariffs don't help with that either. That is why homes are expensive. So the solution is to cut spending and solve the general inflation problem. Stop manipulating, interest rates, and let the market set that, and keep it even keel. Don't go back and forth with that, and get HUD out of encouraging universal home ownership, and get the Federal Reserve out of mortgage-backed securities. That is the solution to the housing crisis. That's the cause of it, and reversing that is the solution. Done. Now, one of the symptoms of, higher pricing caused by the aforementioned factors is that, well, then people can't afford it. So then those that are wealthy with economies of scale will buy up the homes. And that's where you saw this trend really starting last decade, reaching its pinnacle under COVID, of corporations buying up homes. But that's a symptom of that. Lower the pricing, like I mentioned, and that won't be a problem. B, you have to understand it's a delayed reaction. So right now, the amount of large investors who own at least 100 single-family homes, so that's a large investor. We're not talking about 1,000, but at least 100. They only own around 1% of the total family housing stock. That's down from 3.1% in 2022. This was a growing problem, but it's sort of a Twitter, social media populist delayed reaction to it. And honestly, they actually know that the prices are coming down, and they know a crash is coming unless government props it up with the manipulating interest rates that Trump wants to do. So that's partly why I believe Trump was able to do this, because remember, Blackstone CEO Steven Schwartzman is one of the biggest donors to Trump. He owns, they own around 57,000 single family homes. And, why is he going along with this? I think they don't want to buy more anyway. They actually want to offload supply because they know the market's going to crash. So this is an old issue. Moreover, while in some places like Phoenix and Atlanta metro, they compose more than 1%. But remember, I just want to tell you that 89.6% of non-occupant homeowners, you know who they are? Mom and pop. Your neighbor, your friend that dabbles in real estate, owns 1 to 5 homes. For those of you who are watching, here is a graphic from Resi Club, real estate firm. Lance Lambert put that out on Twitter. Could follow his account there. It's put up here. And this is why it's a good idea to subscribe to our YouTube, and you could actually watch in addition to listening. I'm going to try to post some graphics. So you see here, 89.6% of the non-occupant owned homes are from owners that own between 1 to 5. Only 1.6 of the pie of non-occupant homeowners are 1,000 or more. So in most areas, it's largely a delayed reaction. It's reversing itself, and it's a straw man. The other thing is, but again, I don't mind him banning it for the future. Now the question is, would he ban institutional owners that include build to rent? Okay, so there's the ones that buy up existing homes, and then there's the ones that develop. They build it, but not to give away, but to rent. Build to rent is another big one. That is the 800-pound gorilla within the tiny slice of this corporate-owned residential home world, in most parts of the country. I don't know if he's going after that. I don't get the impression he is, but if he but what I'm telling you is once you're doing it, you should ban that. And that's a bigger, slice of the pie. But what again bothers me, and again, Atlanta, Phoenix, Vegas, Nashville, Charlotte, Tampa, those are places it's a little bit more. Just like we said with the housing supply issue, it's generally not a problem, except for a couple areas. But here's the thing, I don't mind him doing it, but here's what I do mind. I mind Trump pushing, again, near zero interest rates. If he had his way, that's what he'd push. Okay? His HUD is pushing more programs to get people into homes. He has this sucky housing bill he's backing that takes all of the programs that juiced up the market and doubles them. It's Elizabeth Warren's plan. Now, banning Blackstone and these companies from buying is also part of the Democrat Elizabeth Warren thing. Now, I don't mind adopting that if you don't adopt their cause of it, and you solve that and you do everything I mentioned from the Federal Reserve and FHA. This is a sort of moral hazard that we're grappling with, all of us. When you don't have a free market, anti-market factors cause certain symptoms in an economy. Should we step in and regulate that? And the answer is sometimes I think we should, but you have to have a limiting principle, not just, I'm just going to act in any way. It has to be part of a broader solution to address the broader problem. But the problem is Trump is arsoning the very factors that are causing housing to go up and that induced this trend of corporate homeowners, which is now reversing. And honestly, they're not opposing it because honestly, the crash is coming. The only one who could prop it, just let it crash. But my concern is Trump is going to prop it up with this housing bill, HUD policies, and his near zero interest rates. And before we get to our guest, I just want to tie this all together. This is what bothers me about the aristopopulism. The aristopopulism is like this. They cause unnatural favors for the elites with the Federal Reserve, with the big tech, with unnaturally low interest rates, distort the arc of trajectory of where the capital goes. Then the average consumer, an American, gets hurt by it. And then they want to come in with some sort of populist solution, which may or may not be a good idea in a vacuum. But the broader thing is we should be pushing free market populism, that to the extent you want to treat these symptoms and sort of ban insurance companies from doing this and ban housing companies from doing that, but also solve the governmental problems that created the problem that is being reflected in those symptoms you don't like. So I know that was sort of a quick presentation, but yeah, I'll support him doing that, but not if he's going to go into the near zero interest rates and these stupid HUD policies. So that is with housing. There's so much more I want to get to. Again, subscribe at Daniel Horowitz, Liberating Truths on Substack, at Horowitz Show on YouTube. And now I want to move on to AI and all that sort of stuff, the data centers, which, folks, it ain't pretty. Artificial, virtual, processed, generation slop, digital slop, porn, hallucination, sycophancy. Is this really this next industrial revolution that we've all been longing for? Big tech has built an internet that's destroying our kids' mental health, de-skilling all of humanity, impelling the shitification of our lives, acculturating us to mediocrity, errors, a lack of creativity. Look, with all technology in the past, there were hiccups, there were bumps. It was a net benefit, but there were problems with it. But it never supplanted humanity like it's doing now. And when I say supplant, I don't mean the way some others use it, that, oh my gosh, it's going to be so effective, humans aren't going to be needed. Just the opposite. Because if it was that effective, and when I'm talking about AI, I mean this generative AI with the LLMs, the chatbot slop, the entire experience of the internet that has gone backwards since last decade. It's like we're headed to a dark era. This is the thing. The internet, when it was created, of course, we had screen addiction way before the chatbots became a thing. But in general, it was a tool that we could use to get smarter. We might lose some skills, which we inevitably probably did. But the internet was set up in a way that you search what you want, and it's kind of endless. And those of us in politics, we see it with Twitter and social media, used to choose who to follow. I think that's a smart follow. I'll follow him. I won't follow him. Now, what you follow, you don't see, and what you see, you don't follow. It's all shoved on you based on algorithms, and the experience of the internet has gone downhill. And then you have all of this artificial intelligence in the sense of, oh, I wanted to complete a bunch of tasks. Well, that's great. But then we find out one after another, it's creating errors, hallucinations, copyright violations, encouraging psychotic and sycophantic behavior, engaging in porn. So a couple things here. It's not free market to have a product that breaks laws and can only produce things by stealing entire book copies. Moreover, this is what happens. My thesis is, and I think we all agree, we're going backwards as human beings. We're losing skills on net. It's not, but it's not like we're losing the skills because it's doing it for us. No, you have to have oversight over it because it's not producing well. But then we're losing the ability to critically think. AI can and should be a tool like every other technology, a tool, not a destination. How do we make it a tool again? Well, first off, you stop government from artificially and unnaturally distorting the market and steering capital to garbage, to slop, where the free market wouldn't make this work. Where do we see we ever go backwards with technology? I'll tell you where we see it. The COVID vaccine, green energy. These are things that only got off the ground because the government monopolized the public square and monopolized the capital markets and the regulatory capture to make it happen. Well, what I'm telling you is with AGI, it's the same thing with the chatbots. Oh, and then to purvey it, they're giving all these unnatural tax breaks to data centers to build a fake economy so it could crush the real one most Americans are actually living with. There's a lot of people that worked in the AI industry, which, by the way, it's gone through several generations. It's been around for decades in many concepts. So it's really nothing new if you understand it. There are people that are starting to raise awareness that, whoa, wait a minute, this is not what I signed up for. People that are very much pro technology, including AI, and see what its potential can be, but not what we're using it for. And one of them is a guest that we debuted on the show at the end of last year, and I want to bring back Tim Estes. He spent 25 years building an AI company, and now he has a mission to use AI to reverse the decline, reverse the regression, the enshittification of the internet, the poisoning of our minds and the minds of our children with digital narcotics. He's the CEO of Angel Q, which is an organization that he's working with to harness technology to help victims of AI and the mental illness that it's spawning. And he's with us again here today. Tim, thanks so much for what you do, and welcome back to The Blaze.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Daniel.
All right, so that was quite a filibuster from me. I want to turn it over to you. Did I sort of get the general proposition correct that we're not anti-technology, we're anti-government artificially creating an artificial processed life out of that technology?
I think that's correct. I think it comes down to a very classic human question about technology, which is to what end? And so we often will get enamored with the potential of new things, the novelty. And we're definitely very much in that phase with this sort of recent renaissance in AI due to the transformer model leading into language models. However, we have spent far less time as a society, far less time in the tech community, asking the question of to what end? And therefore, what should we build versus what can we build? And how should we build versus how fast can we build? So I think what's going on is there's been an obfuscation, a very, very big obfuscation going on. And the obfuscation is that in order to get any of the positive outcomes, you have to accept all the negatives along the way. And in a free society, no one should be obstructing those negatives. You see, that to me is the root of the proposition, the root of the preemption, moratorium on AI regulations, the attempt to obstruct states protecting their citizens.
Yeah.
All these things descend from an ideology, which is, you know what? We believe that ultimately all the people harmed along the way are worth it. Like that, if you cannot escape that being the underlying philosophical assumption of the posture of the accelerationists today. And when they face real backlashes, you'll find them minimizing the harms. You'll find them like, did the White House and the lead AI advisor, did he take one meeting with parents who lost their kids to chatbots? No. Did he take any meetings the whole way through while designing this supposed national policy with the family organizations representing what's happening to our kids? No. And so what we are dealing with now is essentially an attempt to gaslight the country on the idea that in order to succeed with some of the amazing potential that this AI innovation could unlock, and it's starting to unlock, I don't want to deny what it's starting to unlock, that we have to accept use cases of this AI that create amazing harms to children, harms to the elderly, harms to workers, harms to people's economics, their power bills, water supply, all these other elements. And so, you know, they sort of, what they do is this, there's actually a researcher who does this. He did this on violent video games, and they tried to do this on smoking, and they didn't get it to work. They'll call it a moral panic. It's a phrase they love to throw around. So when a bunch of people are being hurt by new technology, the people that are the apologists and the shills for that side try to take the people who are raising the issues that have real victims and create, you know, a bunch of gaslighting around it and denial. And that denial is that, you know what, it's not really the technology causing it. That's the first denial. And of course, as we've seen, and we've seen this in the social media area over the last many years, when the evidence emerges that they designed it for addiction and it's in their own documents released.
Yep.
Like I said, what's come recently is how completely analogous the big tech companies that are focused on attention harvesting, how close they are to the tobacco companies. That they designed products that were intentionally addictive. They knew they were harmful. They knew they were harmful at scale. They didn't do things that would have prevented those harms. They never warned people about those harms. In fact, they suppressed their own research, it looks like.
Yes.
Like to avoid the public being aware of how severe the harms were. And it took...
This has come out in court filings, yep.
And so it's taken people like John Hyde and Jean Twenge and all these others from the sociology, pro-human side of this to say, whoa, whoa, whoa. The curve went like this, okay? And, you know, there aren't many other curves that look that way, okay? So I think that what's going on is I believe we're at an interesting kind of fork in the road. I believe we have actually a fork in the road with three paths, okay? And I want to be thoughtful about the challenges of each path. So the first path, which is the path of staying the course of the way we're on today, kind of falling from social media, is to ignore the known harms of the past coming from our laissez-faire approach to businesses building on technology, despite how they impact people. that we continue that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to add, it's not so laissez-faire in the way you're expressing it. Yes, but
Yeah.
in addition to that, giving tax breaks to data centers.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's corporatism. You're totally right. Yeah.
My thesis is none of this would have gotten off the ground if government wouldn't have gaslit it. So,
yeah, so I think that the winners from the last round with their exploited business models are in position to own our politicians today. I mean, I think it came out that OpenAI's president dumped $25 million into the Trump campaign last year. Okay, like it just a filings. I mean, we're just like 25 million. I mean, that's like King Griffith money from a few years ago on the Republican side, right? So I think that they're saying, we'll pay the price necessary to get influence, and they have plenty to go around, right? So I think what we're looking at now is, as I said, the path we're on today, the first path, and as the path we have to turn away from as soon as possible, is one that says that the impact on human beings that is known and harmful and intentional based on design of the technology and by the companies is a necessary evil to get to the end state they want. It's utilitarian. It's using humans as a means to an end. That's how we got here. They want to continue that. That's the model they know how to monetize. So that's path one.
And before you go on to path two, just to explain with path one, because that's very important, because I'm a free market guy.
Yeah.
But people need to understand we never do this in any other context. So if you have a sandwich shop, right, that stuff, you're going to have inspections. You can't have harmful things. And especially on the right, and we're addressing everyone, but particularly it begins first with the right, because it's their champion, President Trump, that's actually the biggest leader of that path one. And Maha is a big part of, the right's constituency right now, if you want to call it that. And, they're all for government saying, whoa, you can't put these chemicals and dyes in the processed food. So this is processed brain rot that, like, for example, we have a lot of technology that could do a lot of things and could have done a lot of things for 100 years, but we don't allow it to do certain things because that's criminal activity, that's harmful, morally wrong. So for example, copyright. So we don't allow you to just rip off someone's book. We don't allow that, even though you have the technology to do it. Well, it turns out I don't know if you saw this, Stanford study just came out that production LLMs can leak near verbatim text, like Claude 3.7. They prompted to start the title of Harry Potter, and it would leak 95.8% of it. 95.8% of it. So that's criminal activity we don't allow. Why should we make an exception? Or it encourages psychotic suicidal behavior. Or we just saw, for example, the EU is scrutinizing Grok for flooding X with these digital undressed women, women and children. So
yeah. I mean, the Princess Kate. I mean, now queen. I mean, soon to be queen. I mean, the princess and soon to be at some point queen of England. This is happening too, right? I mean, it is staggering what we have allowed to happen, where we're allowing technologies to victimize human beings in ways that would send humans to jail for tens of years if the human did it instead of the AI. So, I don't really understand how, if in other situations criminally, if you use some technical means to accomplish something that's criminal, you're still liable.
Yep.
How is that not the case here? In fact, what's so particularly disturbing is these companies or groups like NetChoice and others that are fighting against age verification laws. Like, it literally seems that everything we do to try to protect people and kids from these things, those companies use their minions to go out there and do things like say it's First Amendment protected. I mean, I wouldn't even say, Ben Franklin wouldn't even be rolling over in his grave. He would be vomiting all over them right now.
Yeah. When you're engaging in commerce, that's different than, if I tell someone, go kill yourself. Well, you have freedom of speech, but you cannot sell products that engage in, this harmful behavior. So, and there's a whole bunch of things I want to get to, but that's path one.
Yeah, so that's path one. And so in reaction to path one, fundamentally sacrifices inherent human dignity to make people a means to the end for a few to monetize massively, and then defines it as freedom. Okay, that's path one. We don't do this in many other areas, to your point. We don't do it with drug companies, right? Anything that has a major effect on human, like mental psychology and other things, we have generally regulations around these things.
Yep.
And food supply. So what's interesting is it's coming from an almost libertarian anarchist kind of standpoint, right? Not really a conservative philosophy at all, because you don't end up in conservatism without going through human dignity. If you throw human dignity away at the very beginning of your philosophy, you'll never end up with something conservative. So long story short is, the second path is the reaction to the first path. The second path is we have to go backwards. We have to turn the technology off. We have to basically no smartphones until 16, all the rest of it. And it's being put out there by a lot of very good people. And for the most part, I actually agree that right at this moment, it is the strategy that has to be used. Why? Because there is no third path yet.
There is no, yeah.
Okay. Right now, it's expose your kids to things that will damage their lives in ways that cannot be undone, or restrict technology use and keep them kind of sheltered from technology. That
in other words, the question is, like, for example, I have an 8th grader and a 10th grader.
Yeah.
And, and this is the balance that you have to see what to do, because I look back to when I was that age, my brain was developing that age without any of this, slop and this nonsense.
Yeah.
And the internet was kind of a side thing. You looked at it here and there, but your life was mainly off of it. Forget about social media. Forget about the algorithmic stuff playing with you and capturing everything you do and spitting it back at you. That didn't exist. So the question is how to use today's technology to give our kids, as much as it's practicably possible, the same human developmental experience we had.
Yeah, or a better one even. And so I think that I think that this reaction, what I'll call sort of tech abstinence, has arisen because of how obvious and pervasive the harms are of technology. And it goes as far as like kids that are spending way too much time on tech until late in the evening, the blue light messing with their circadian rhythms, leading to bad sleep. Bad sleep is the greatest predictor of depression, actually, and obesity. And so you think about Maha and the work there. If we don't tackle like getting screens back to a healthy level, we will not make the kids healthy again, because they're being essentially blown up by the blue light right now. Okay.
Wow.
So these things are interrelated. And I want to be like praising like the people out there like John Haidt and others who have been out there leading and fighting these things, because I find myself in lockstep with them and lockstep with the parents. Having said that, I'm unwilling to accept that the choice is bad technology or no technology. Okay. I think it's not American to accept that decision. I think that what we need to have is say, you know what, there's a lot of really good uses of the technology, and we need to, as a nation, as a culture, as an industry, be throwing all in on those things, and we need to be scolding or suing or criminalizing some of the stuff that is doing the harmful stuff in door number one. Okay. And so what that means is you have what you call with this administration, a muscular policy toward effective and moral use of AI. Okay. We don't need a weak, passive, limp policy, which is what we have today because of the big tech companies wanting no policy. All right.
And which, by the way, is the same thing as the COVID vaccines. It is not, they talk about us regulating. No, they're the ones pushing indemnity. They are pushing an AI amnesty, a data center amnesty at the hardware level as well, because that's what they're saying. They're saying that you absolutely cannot put any regulations, let's talk about from the data center standpoint, that we would put on any heavy infrastructure, that it has to work within the contours of the nature of a community, a neighborhood, agricultural land, zoning. They're like, none of that. None of that. We don't, you could debate anarcho-libertarianism, and I know you and I are conservatives, but what you can't do is have anarcho-libertarianism for one industry and the opposite for everything else.
That's right. Because what that is that's naked corporatism trying to sound philosophical. Okay. And so, and that's what we have. I mean, that's what we have. That's why it's so shallow. That's why every argument is so shallow. That's why the statistics, like the thousands of AI laws, which was total BS because they basically word counted everything that had the word AI in it or variations of it in all the state bills. And these are like proclamations on education that might talk about AI and had no binding effect of any kind. Like there's so much obfuscation from the other side, so much misinformation, so much gaslighting about it. Meanwhile, the whole motivating argument is we can't lose to China. But the Chinese know well enough to limit their version of TikTok to 40 minutes a day by law. Okay. Douyin. And their version of TikTok was described in recent documents that came out as spinach. Okay. If I remember right, spinach or broccoli. And the people at TikTok in the US described their own version as fentanyl. So we're letting, what I find unbelievable is this administration has literally gone and taken out of the government because of drug trafficking. All right. In the last week, why are we enabling technology drug traffickers left and right in this country? Admitted so in their own documents. How is that morally reconcilable at all? So that's kind of where I look at this. The third path, and this is the path where America wins. Okay. I think abstinence is a defensive motion on this that is well justified right now. Tech ops, basically abstaining from technology, especially with kids in certain areas, is 100% justified, 100% viable given today's context. But we will lose if that is our only strategy. Okay. But we'll lose worse if we stay on the current path where we destroy the next generation as we started to destroy the last one. All right. The only path to winning as a nation is to say, you know what? We want factories that have amazing, like human-like robots that are very capable and functioning.
Yes.
That basically replace the $0 labor in another country with $0 robot labor here that's managed by human beings and creates amazing abundance. I believe that is an amazing future. I think that
Get
kind of
it
stuff
in the physical world, not in your brain.
Yeah, it's so part of this is, if I had to boil it down, we have sacrificed human sovereignty on technology because the people that have monetized the technology want to overcome human sovereignty to control people and addict them. And that is the thing we need to have no quarter for. We need to view them as pushers. They call themselves pushers in their documents. Okay.
The Chinese aren't doing this. They're doing more productive things with it. And the data centers have the most liability, the most pain to produce the least useful cloud-based chat slop. And I would argue they're the Luddites. They call us that. I would argue, and this is what you're talking about with Path 3, that we're pursuing. We want to steer back capital investments into things that will actually be useful to robotics, whereas they're the ones that are giving unnatural tax regulatory zoning carve-outs for things that really are not solvent anymore, and are creating a lot of errors. I want to get to some of the errors. One of the things that bothers me is, so like, look, let's say, AI could do a bunch of stuff and replace a human need for a bunch of things. So, and people are going to be surprised based on where I'm coming from, because I am not in bucket 2. I'm in bucket 3. I'm very much pro technology. I'm very much of the belief that while you often lose old skills and maybe in a gross way, in an isolated way, not get it back, but in a net, you will create better skills, better productivity. The problem that I'm having is that all of the government capital that it's steered to the LLM model, this sort of model construct of pursuing artificial general intelligence, it's just good enough to to addict the human to it, acculturate a generation that this is how you do research, this is how you do writing, this is how you do certain tasks. But it's enough to de-skill Americans, and that's a big problem now. But then it actually doesn't accomplish it enough. So I want to get your comment on a couple things. They're talking about it for medical. This is what the CEO of Oracle, Larry Ellison, used as his ultimate paradigm for Stargate during Trump's first week when he was at the Oval Office.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, it's going to do everything with medical. It's going to solve everything. You know, well, okay. You would think, what's easier to do, diagnose or treat? Well, obviously diagnose. Treatment, and that's very vexing, but their problem is saying it's going to treat. Okay, diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
A new study found from researchers at Einstein Medical College, AI had a 23% error rate in cancer diagnosis. It's the first meta-analysis of hallucination incidents in LLM responses to oncology questions. I mean, again, like, it's fine to use it as a tool, but if we're going to degrade doctor skills to rely on something that has gaping holes, isn't that going backwards?
Well, I think I want to be careful that we're actually reflecting where the technology is today and where it's going to be, and not necessarily where it has been the last 18 months. Okay. That study, one of the challenges is it's looking at mostly GPT-4 and 3.5. Those are a tiny fraction of the intelligence of what's just shipped at like Opus 4.5 from Anthropic. Okay. So I think we need to be a little bit, we need to be disciplined on this relative to that. One of the great, kind of travesties is how many errors are human errors in the healthcare, domain, especially in hospitals and so forth. So I'd say that there is immense potential there. What I want to ground is this. So I might want to take a little bit different direction, Daniel, than you're going with this, which is, I think you're right on the following idea, which is we essentially are watching certain companies make national policy that create malinvestment on a path that the market would not supply the same level of investment to. And by doing that, we're actually biasing how we explore and improve this technology to deal with veracity, to deal with efficiency. And what's interesting is to watch China again on this, all right? China doesn't have the luxury of the GPUs we have for a couple of reasons. Now, we're racing fast to change that one by giving, Jensen Huang the
U.S. grants TSMC annual license to import U.S. chip making tools into China. So,
well, what's hilarious is this. Did you see that the Chinese government actually put out a thing to block that in the last 48 hours, or say stop buying from NVIDIA? I think the China government doesn't believe we're doing this in good faith, and we probably have done something to those chips. Okay, because the idea we would sell that to them is such a unbelievable strategic blunder if we haven't hacked those chips that they probably think we have. And therefore they're stopping their own supply chains, right? And anyway, so I don't know what the reality of the truth is, and I'm not read in on that kind of stuff. But when I watch what China does with this and what we've done, it's almost like, wow, how could they be giving us the keys to the kingdom? They have to have some agenda going on. We're going to stop them because we don't see what the agenda is. Because it makes no sense to them that we're doing. Strategically, it looks to them like we made a huge blunder, right? But my point I got off of, which is what you're seeing is these Chinese labs are actually making major strides in efficiency on multiple fronts. They are fixing the architecture in ways that make smaller models radically better than what they were a few months ago, okay? And by doing that, they'll need a lot less GPUs than we do. Well, you know what? Just like nature adapts to the environment, if we weren't giving massively debt charged data center build outs on a set of chips that are going to be totally amateurized and worthless in 4 years, all right,
and they'll degrade and depreciate within a few years anyway.
That's what I'm saying. It's like this is the worst malinvestment from a depreciation standpoint in economic history, full stop. Okay, and we're cheerleading it along, and the reason they're cheerleading along is they think they have a path without fixing the architecture to get to AGI. That's why they're doing it. And so the point is, if I can get it all in and all the compute, I can brute force it. All right. Meanwhile, we see all these cracks in the architecture from truthfulness, safety, the potential runaway possibilities, what I generally call the, and a friend of mine, Max Tegmark, I think has put out well, and I think Governor Santos may have said some of this, digital gain of function research. Okay. What's going on is they're going after digital gain of function research because they think they can create something that changes the course of human history. And they're not being motivated. Honestly, they're not being motivated, despite what they say, that, oh, this is going to cure cancer. They'll gaslight us on that. People that wanted to cure cancer, that care that much about human beings, don't let it strip all the clothes off Kate Middleton. Okay? If you don't care about basically people's fundamental human dignity, you're not really going to care about curing them from sickness either. Okay? Wow. That's the contradiction. And so when their business models and their solutions do such harm that was obviously preventable and easily preventable in the design phase, but they cut the corner to get it out faster, you know they're doing it because of ego. They're not doing it because of love of humanity. They may rationalize that to themselves, but people that love humanity don't go run over kids and strip clothes off grown women, like basically cyber rape, okay? They don't do that and create tools that do that en masse, because it's totally anathema to them, just like watching someone degrade from sickness is anathema to them, all right? So what you have to say instead is that's a bunch of window dressing for an ego trip and trying the government to go in with it. So this ego is the challenge. The challenge we have is
money. Government shoved all the money in their direction. And, that's right. And the bottom line is, you talked about them being the winners of the last generation and then have the market share. And then this ties into other Trump administration policies. Everything they do is all about juicing up the valuation of the stock market, even not related to AI. Mm-hmm. But then what is the stock market? Increasingly concentrated in those companies that are
40% or more of the S&P 500 in terms of the actual index is tied to 10 tech companies.
So what I get you're saying, just to give an analogy, I want to see if you agree. You're saying China is actually doing more the Tony Gwynn, and we're trying to do the Bo Jackson. They're coming in every day, the base hit, getting on base, fine-tuning what they're doing. We're trying to create this 500-foot home run. We're just going to spend trillions, make America a parking lot for data centers, get everyone's life on cloud, monitor it, and out's going to spit a cure to this and to that. And it's sophomoric. It's dumb. It's malinvestment.
It's unwise. It's malinvestment and it's unwise. And now what's interesting is it should not be surprising to us that the strategy is so unwise when the leadership exhibits such juvenile behavior. Okay? When they chip a Sora as like the great innovation, you know, the engine of video AI slop, and they run roughshod over copyright en masse, roughshod over deepfake protections en masse, and all these other things. It should just tell you everything that they view. Ultimately, the problem is this: we need different companies and different leaders driving those companies probably than we have today, with maybe a handful of exceptions. Okay.
They're the ones that built China's surveillance state. They're the ones that built the COVID biomedical security state. They're the ones with the transhumanism.
The Great Firewall of China was not built by Chinese companies. And that's one of our great points of shame. It was built by our companies.
Yeah. I don't understand how you could beat China with the companies that did it. This is what it boggles the mind to watch, especially people on the right, not just defend, but champion as the greatest potential for our lives, for our economy, the leadership of the companies that they implicated themselves in the transhumanism, in the COVID crimes, in the surveillance state that they don't like. Everything we're doing is very good for the surveillance state. That makes sense, but not for what they're talking about and what we want to get. It's like, again, I look at even Microsoft is admitting that Windows 11 is garbage. It's error-ridden. Yet earlier this year, they claimed up to 30% of the code was written by AI. And again, this is stuff, like you said, that could and probably will get better. But we're seeing massive gaps even in things that should be its bread and butter, mathematical equations, coding. Forget about things that have human emotional intelligence that you need, which is everything. Like there was the Swedish CEO of Klarna, a company called Klarna, that was talking about these call centers, the customer service centers, and they thought they could replace 100, one thing could be worth 800 workers. But again, they're finding, there's more EQ, I would say, involved. But even things that are straight math and coding, there's a lot of gaps. It should and will get better. But you know what? If they pursue the AGI data center chatbot slot model, we actually will be behind China in getting that better.
Yeah. So if I kind of synthesize this a little bit, so like I said, I'm a little more of a true believer that in some of these areas they're going to be accelerating past humans actually pretty soon. I think on the coding area, for instance, there's been an unbelievable improvement in that capability in the last 60 to 90 days. All right. So a lot of the things that you're putting stories on, like the Microsoft one, the root of that problem is the race to monetize AI and get value out of it ran ahead of its capability. Okay. And part of the reason is they're spending so much in CapEx.
Yes.
That they're basically making unwise decisions and impatient decisions.
Yes.
All right. So the challenge is because we've allowed and enabled, is probably the better word, the malinvestment, it's created a new incentive that's also unwise and impatient to deploy and use before we know that it's effective, that it's safe, that it's truthful. And we're seeing that in education. We're seeing that in all kinds of areas. So at the root issue, it is just people basically being unwise and then not wanting to have accountability for the consequences of their bad decisions. Okay?
Because government gives them the rope.
That's right. Either the liability shield or the capital backstop, right? I mean, it's either going to be the liability shield or the bailout or both. They want all of it, right? So, and so when I look at this, once again, that comes down to the human judgment of the leadership of the companies. And, you know, they're far more worried about being second or third than they are about getting it wrong by going too early.
Yeah.
And I think those incentives are a little bit off because there's a lot of collateral damage when they're too early. And so but I want to be very careful that I expect that the way we use search today is nearly already vaporized by AI from where it was 3 years ago. And it's going to finish being vaporized by AI, meaning that the idea that you should be looking at a bunch of ad links in Google search results to get information should be gone in a year or 2 years. Okay.
Well, I don't like the Google AI that it pops up on those searches, you know.
Yeah, well, it's going to be something like that. But I think this is why it changes what the needs are, because when we look at the framing, once again, the framing that has enabled this period of time since 2023 and now, that despite knowing this giant world-changing technology is being built out, the framing that's allowed it to be unregulated has been based on this false idea that the best strategy to beat China is not to regulate it, because regulation equals bad, equals slow. When in this case, poisoning the population actually is a great Chinese strategy that might be the way they beat us, and we've done it to ourselves. All right.
We're following all the bad things they do, except they deploy it as an asymmetrical weapon against their adversaries. We self-immolate and turn it on ourselves.
Well, yeah, and it may be more nefarious than that. What's interesting to me is like not too long ago we had 100% tariffs on China because of fentanyl-related stuff, right? I mean, like 50% of it was like fentanyl. They've got American companies churning out fentanyl to the American population. Don't you think they're cheerleading that right now? And they're not actually getting the tariffs raised over it. Okay, so like to me, like we don't look that smart right now. We really don't look that smart right now. We look like we are playing, you know, checkers against three-dimensional chess on this thing. And it's based on a bunch of fairly false, you know, assumptions. So let's look at this a little different, which is if we want to have the AI technology base and the ecosystem of companies and products that the world picks over China's version, that's the big Sachs argument, right? We want to have that. I'm going to make a point here that I don't think gets made enough. People don't just choose things for efficiency. It's a major driver, okay? But people pay more for some things because they trust it in the quality of it, not just the efficiency. Or else everything we own would be Chinese knockoffs. All right? And thankfully, not everything is. A lot is, but not everything is. All right? And if you want to get, you know, it's almost like the joke was like one of the great human blunders is getting into a land war in Asia. You know, if you remember Princess Bride, one of the great blunders in economic policy is trying to out-commoditize China because of scale differences. And it seems like our strategy is thinking our GPU advantage, which is very transient, will allow us to out-commoditize China. And that's not a good strategy. Okay? China will likely create AI that is as efficient as ours, if not before us, not too long after us, and then give it away in order to scorch earth on economic viability, like they've done with their current open source models. All right. That seems to be the way the national government and the companies aligned with it are executing right now. Okay. We have an opportunity that they cannot actually do. We could be designing AI that's aligned to human beings, that is thoughtful and trustworthy on everything that trained it. Not like Meta trained Llama on porn, where they got sued by the porn industry, as you may have seen, because they trained it on gross bestiality, awful stuff. And that's been behind, that same model is actually behind the chat system in Roblox that kids are getting exposed to, by the way. All right. So if America wants to prevail, we prevail in the world when our values prevail and when we're consistent with those values. America was loved in the world because it was a place where human beings were treated with dignity, and you could come in from anywhere and you could progress. You could progress economically, you could progress in your religion, in your culture, development. That comes from a certain fundamental set of beliefs, a creed that's a Declaration of Independence. Okay, it comes from how we found a normative peace. We need AI that codifies in how it handles human beings and that is immutable on these aspects that respects human dignity. And we need to make that efficient. And if we do that, every free country in the world will go with our AI over China's. And guess what? China won't do it because that's not what they believe. If that was in the AIs, they would find the AIs defying their communist government. Yep. They won't allow it to happen. So they actually can't compete on values. So my question is, why are we not investing in AI research that makes us the leader on values? Because that's the path to victory.
Values-based AI, which should be everything we do, should be values-based. We're pretty much out of time. I just want to end off with Angel Q, your program, what you're trying to do to actually harness technology to solve some of these problems. Here's what I would love to see. I would love to see how we could harness technology to give to put on our devices, our computers, phones, particularly for our kids, that actually put the human first. So it makes the internet experience what you're looking for, not infinite, but finite as a tool for what you're looking for, yes, rather than algorithms attacking, digitally fentanylizing your brain, capturing everything you do. Is that what you're pursuing now? Stuff that will make sure that they're not exposed to porn, they're not exposed to things that are harmful, they're not tracked, and then have that tracking spit back to them to create addiction. Is that the sort of technology that you're working on?
Yeah. So putting back kind of my less Tim Estes hat on and more my Angel Q hat on for just a minute. So Angel Q is an AI that's built safe for kids. Okay. I went after doing this and built it up because I saw the horror stories coming out of social media and challenges and things like that with 10-year-olds and so forth, dying from these horribly designed systems that were preventable. And I've got young kids myself, and I'm like, not in my country, not. Okay, so that's where it comes from. It's manifested as an application that's like call it a browser replacement type application for children. It's on the App Store, on iOS, so we have it on the Apple platforms. But we've also built all this technology underneath it to assure that the interactions that kids have with this AI it's healthy, so it's limited, it is effective, it's articulated at an age-appropriate level. And there was no design. In fact, if anything, there were patterns picked in our design that make all these natural stopping points happen where kids don't spend excessive time on this thing. They get what they need. It's a tool. They get what they need. They go back to their lives. And as it evolves, it's going to do more than that. It's going to not just get them what they need and they move on. It's going to sort of work with the parent to nudge them toward healthier things. Okay. And I think that's really where AI has an enormous promise, is AI could set right all the impacts that have been negative on human wellness from social media and these other addictive applications. And most of the AIs that have been delivered are the opposite of that. They're actually the worst version of social media. They're the character AI and others, where they're the next addictive fentanyl-like thing. And we at Angel Q are just saying, you know what, this is a huge problem. we're not the only answer, but we can at least solve a piece of this so that parents can know their kids can research, they can explore, and their childhood is not sacrificed because they were curious with technology, which is evil. Like that's where the world we are today is their innocence is sacrificed to discover things they're often asked to discover from school assignments and other things. We built an answer for that problem. We built tech underneath it, and we're just starting. The hope of this year is we realize that as we get families using this, like that's one part of the answer, but we're starting to talk to very large companies and companies that care actually, that companies that haven't shipped AI products, okay? These are some of the bigger toy companies in the world, and they have not shipped AI products because they actually care about safety, okay? The ones that really care, because they haven't shipped anything. Okay.
Because AI at the end of the day is not a god. It is a tool, and it's a tool of the maker. And, it's not us versus China so much. I mean, in the right way, if you present it that way, it could be, but it's whether the good guys develop it or bad guys like the CEOs of these so-called American companies. And that's the thing. It's a reflection of their values. We need to use it as a reflection of our values. And I think that's a good place to land it. Angel Q, folks, download the app. Is something I really want to explore and partner with in the future, because we all have kids and we're all trying to deal with this. It knows no partisan bounds, no religious bounds. But this was, we really covered everything. Tim, I got to have you back. You are really a treasure. You put together the brain and the heart together, because I think that's what we need. Smart information. We need soulful information, and you certainly provided that. So good luck with this endeavor, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you, Daniel. It's always a pleasure to be on.
God bless. So, folks, again, that was Tim Estes. You can follow him, TW Estes, on Twitter. We are way over time here, but that was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Florida has put out a bill. There is a bill, HB 1007 in the legislature. I want you guys to check up, that does deal with the data center side of this, and there's going to be more legislation there coming. I'm going to try to track that, but there's a lot to digest here. So, folks, listen again. You're probably going to have to, listen a couple times. Tim put so much out there to digest it. At Horowitz Show on YouTube, in addition to see our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you get it, and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter on Substack at Daniel Horowitz, as well as my Blaze columns, Blaze TV subscription. Till tomorrow, Micah 6'8", and God bless y'all.